Colin Hodgkinson is here, and that's very exciting for me as someone who cares about music that comes out of the 60s, which is really music coming out of the 50s into the 60s and then into the 70s. And this man has followed it all the way up to the current day. He's been an active member of so many important groups. I am just, I'm floored by the amount of topics we have in front of us today because, we'll have fun, but it's just, it's difficult to choose because I do want to talk about Untold Passion. I think one note I can tell you about it is that it came into my consciousness when I heard Jan Hammer, Tony Williams Quartet at the Bottom Line in New York City play it as part of their, because they play a Jan tune, they play a Tony tune, they play a Jan tune, and Jan tunes were like from different people's albums and stuff. So he had tunes all over the place that they could do. They did, some interesting Tony tunes. And so that was played, and it was an extended Jan solo because he had the backup keyboards of Jordan Rudess, Fernando, and Tony. It was an incredible powerhouse band. And I know, like myself, you're just a huge admirer of Jan Hammer. We're going to talk about him, but I do want to give you a proper introduction. Colin Hodgkinson is one of the most important musicians. I don't say even bassists, I say musicians in rock music history. So we're very honored to have him here at the ProgCast. I'm Gregg Bendian. I'm the guy that gets a little geeky and asks some sort of inside baseball questions. And those who can tolerate, we have a good time. So I'm very happy to have this gentleman. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you very much, Greg. Thank you.
So Colin, I kind of am interested in your beginnings, as I am with so many musicians. I want to know, like, what made you fall in love with music? When did that happen for you?
Well, when I was a kid, we used to, there were quite a lot of bands used to march through the town. And my mother said I'd always sort of want to follow them, pull along. I'm like 4 or 5 years old, And she said I'd get an old sort of biscuit tin, put rubber bands around it and stuff away. So, the first thing I got was a ukulele, actually. That's the first thing I ever had. And then I was pretty sick with mumps, in my early teens. And I had an uncle that was in the Merchant Navy, and they were out filming Island in the Sun, with Harry Belafonte, and all the crew bought guitars. But I knew he never played it. I kept pestering him and finally he gave it to me, So that's how I sort of started. But because I'm a lefty, I started playing upside down. And so he said, well, you could play the chords a lot better if you turn the strings around. So okay, we did that, and
stayed lefty.
Yeah. I mean, I played with the strings the right way now.
Yes.
I guess I mess around in little groups at school, like we all did, And there was a band in my town called the Rebel Rousers, named after the Duane Eddy tune. I went along to see him. Must be 1958, 59, and the bass player actually played the melody of Duane Eddy's Rebel Rouser, and I heard that. I thought, this is it, this is what I wanted. This is the instrument I want to play.
Some guy had the wherewithal to do that on a bass and make it sound like something.
Sure. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool as hell.
And I still see him. I mean, he's one of my oldest friends. He's 82 this year,
Who? Please say his name.
His name's Rex Gates. And he was in a lot of the early British rock and roll bands. I mean, probably you had like Marty Wilde, Emil Ford, people like this. And he was in the first wave of rock music that was, the end of the 50s, really, So that's when I decided I wanted to play bass, So that's what I did, and, started to get very, very much into jazz as well. And
let me ask you this, though. When you heard him play that melody, do you remember anything about his gear or what his setup would have been? Would that have been unusual for a bass player to have that kind of power?
Well, I think bass players were sadly neglected in those days for amplifiers. I mean, the guitar players had the Vox AC30s, and early 60s, we got the Fender amps over here, which are wonderful, but bass players were stuck with these 30-watt amps, and they just weren't they weren't loud enough. Or if you cranked them right up, you got distortion. And but somehow he got a good sound out of this bass.
Really, he did.
Yeah.
Live, he did.
Live, he did. And let's remember, the bands were a lot quieter then. They played a lot quieter in those days.
There weren't PAs; they were just amps.
Well, they just had a couple of columns in those days. Like before WEM even. Before they were all, everything was pretty basic.
No monitors.
No. God, and we used to stand behind the amps, not in front of them. That was it, I mean, there's a very kind of famous English bass player called Mo Foster, who played with Jeff Beck,
And he was in Coliseum, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Coliseum too.
He's, I mean, he wrote a very good book called 17 Watts ? About these early days. It's terrific with all that. And he said they looked at this amplifier. It was a Watkins Dominator. It had a triangular front, and it was 17 watts. And he said they talked amongst themselves, the band. They said, "Do we really need 17 watts?" He said, like 10 years later, he's playing with Jeff Beck. He's got 2 Ampeg SVTs up there. But that's the way it went.
That's interesting to me because, I look at guys like Jack Bruce and a contemporary of yours, really, who was doing lead bass and was strong as an acoustic player, as strong as an electric player, and what his amplification situation must have been like. Did you guys follow each other in terms of that? Or did we all follow your own way of trying to get the bass to be a really strong voice in the ensemble?
I think we followed our own paths, actually, because, I mean, when I sort of really got into playing it, I mean, we were a band like doing rock and roll covers a lot, a lot of Chuck Berry and stuff like that. So my first thing was, I want to play those chords on the bass. That's what I thought. But at the same time, I'm listening to like Charlie Mingus and Red Mitchell, Ray Brown, these guys, and I wanted to learn those solos. So it kind of came from that, sort of 2 totally different angles, really, And I mean, of course, excuse me, what really, I suppose, defined the style for me was when I was in Backdoor. And this was like this band in the early 70s, which was really horn, bass, and drums, So there's no chord instrument. So then I got to play a lot more, and bass lines and the melody. It was great. It was very challenging, but it was, that's really what defined my style, I guess,
Oh, really? Because I felt as though, so was that sort of a moment for you in your musical realization, was being able to keep Backdoor going because you were leading a band from the bass chair?
Well, yeah, excuse me. It was pretty much me and the horn player, Ronnie, because he was a very good musician and he had
Great
a lot
musician.
of, and he had a lot of, let's say, musical skills that I didn't have. I mean, I'm self-taught, but he learned. He was schooled, and he knew how to arrange things properly, and he taught me a lot about that, the theoretical side of music.
But what was your early experience? So were you trying to cop Charlie Parker licks on the bass?
No, not really. No, I was just. I mean, it came from a lot of different people. I mean, it was Mingus was a big thing for me because he had such
Mingus?
Charlie Mingus.
Oh, which albums?
Blues and Roots was the big one for me. I love that album. I got it when I was 15. And I just wore it out. But also loving all the rock stuff that was going on, especially the 50s rock. That was just, it was so fresh after all these sort of dreadful, boring music that was going on in England in the 50s.
That's interesting because that means that you found the music of your time.
Yes, I did. I mean, they say we don't just live our lives, we live the lives of our time, and that's very true. We do, and those sort of things, I suppose they form what you become, those influences are always with you,
When I tell you what it was like to grow up with progressive music on popular radio in New York City as normal life.
Yeah.
Okay. 7:30 a.m. getting ready for school, having a biscuit and tea, and Joni Mitchell Hejira is on the radio.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was a cloudy day. I remember that. And it was Song for Sharon. And
Uh,
it just changed my life, you know what I mean? Because that could happen. And
mm.
that there was that kind of freeform radio in New York City at that time. Were you aware of Backdoor doing well in New York?
Well, excuse me, the first time I came to the States was in 73, and we came to do the second album in Electric Lady, you know.
Right.
Felix Pappalardi was the producer, you know, so that was my first time in the States, and I loved it. I love New York, you know.
Where did you stay?
We stayed, I think we were in like 48th Street or somewhere like that, not far from Manny's, you know, so,
Yeah.
and I mean, that was heaven to go in a music shop like that. I mean, I went in there because I actually wanted to get a fretless precision bass, you know. And I said, you don't happen to have a left? He said,
What year were they? What year was this, Colin?
73, 74, you know.
Were they making them, or you were making a request?
No, they were making them then standard. When I bought my first one in 62, it was a special order, and it cost 10% more, and I had to wait 3 months to get it, you know. So it was a lot of money then as well in England, you know, for me, because I mean, I wasn't making much, and it took me like a year and a half to pay for it, but yeah. I've still got it.
Yeah. You had to have it.
Yeah, oh yeah, I had to have it, you know, that was it. And yeah, so I mean, I met Ronnie because I went up to a place in the northeast of England called Redcar, you know, and it's on the coast, with a jazz trio, with a Hammond organ trio. And he used to come in with a soul band, and they played every Tuesday night, and I mean, the place was heaving with sort of young people. And that's how I first met him, you know, and we sort of got out a beer and started talking. And I actually went round to have sort of sight reading lessons with him, really. And we sort of we were the same, you know, we liked the same things, and that's how we kind of got to play together, really, you know. That was the beginning of Backdoor, and we wrote a lot of stuff. And eventually this guy had a pub up on the North York Moors. It's a really remote part of England. This place is called the Lion Inn. It's like a 15th century pub, you know, old stone place. And he took it over and he said, why don't you come up and play in my pub? And we said, well, what do you want us to play? He said, anything you like. That was music to our ears, you know, because if you work in nightclubs, you've got to play dinner music, you've got to play dance music. But he got there and just played this, you know, it was wonderful. It really was. Wow. And he financed the first album for us because we sent out demos to all the companies, and they said, look, you know, you haven't got a keyboard player, you've got no lead singer, you've no guitar player. Get out of here. It was that, you know, it was, we couldn't get a deal. And he said, how much would it cost? Excuse me. So we said, well, we could probably get a day in a little demo studio in London. And he said, okay, I'll finance it. So that's how we did it. We made that album in 8 hours, you know, that's it. And mixed it in 4 the next day, because that's how much money we had. We just had to do it. And that was what really the press started to write about and rave about. And that's really what launched it all, you know. It was great, it really was. The next thing is the guy who owned, you know, Ronnie Scott's Club in London is a famous.
I do.
Well, the guy who owned it, he got a copy of the album, and he phoned us up and he said, look, I love what you guys are doing. Do you want to come down and do 2 weeks opposite Chick Corea? We said, wow. You know? So that's what we did. And it got extended to 3 weeks. It was such a...
This is early Return to Forever?
72.
So Joe Farrell?
Joe Farrell, Flora Purin, Airto on kit, Stanley and Chick, you know? Yeah.
Cool.
Well, that was a great couple of weeks, you know.
That's a great blend, actually, between those two bands.
It was really, it really was, you know.
See, that's interesting because is that your first encounter with Stanley?
Yeah, it was.
I think you had a big impact.
Well, he was, to be honest, he played upright. He played double bass.
In that group, he's playing upright.
Yeah, except for, I think maybe a couple of tunes he played like a hollow body, like a Gibson EB2, something, you know, the one that looks like a 335.
Yeah, because he didn't have the alembic yet.
Oh, no, he didn't have that. And then I heard him later, he came out with school, and I was like, wow, you know, that's, you know, so maybe, you know, who knows? I suppose we all get influenced by other people, you know, what people play. And
well, it's interesting to make bass. I mean, School Days is a very important record in my childhood, you know, as a teen, in 76, when it came out, that's when I was tuned into everything at, let's see, and we're talking about so many things. I'd be like 13, 14.
Oh,
And
really?
this stuff's on the radio. School Days is on the radio. Backdoors on the radio. Alexis Korner's on the radio here. We had British shows. We were proud to have. We had Monty Python on public broadcasting here. That was the early love affair with things British, because also you guys were into some really hip shit. And then in a funny way, it's like you were reflecting American stuff.
It's like we think of bands like the Rolling Stones, for instance. They want to record in Chicago. They want to record at Chess Studios. I think they really showed America what they had on their doorstep all the time. All these great blues. We love those people, but they couldn't get arrested in the States at that time. I don't think, and it gave them another career,
right,
which was wonderful. To see John Lee Hooker and Muddy and Howlin' Wolf and all these people come over to England. It was like, wow, it was wonderful. So. Great, that was great. Some justice.
You got a chance to play with them, Colin?
No, I didn't. No, but they were on. The regular sort of. There were a couple of shows, TV shows on. Well, they were often on. Those people. They'd often, they'd have John playing Dimples or Boom Boom or whatever, and it was great. It really was.
And they also had, I think, a good amount of affection for Captain Beefheart in England.
Oh yeah, a friend of mine, Beefheart and Zappa at that time. That's some crazy music. Beefheart, I love it. I think it's great.
I bet you do. You do.
But
you can hear it. You're one of the few guys. I'm look at him. I'm like, oh well, he knows what all the parts are, how they're working. Yeah, those probably didn't blow your mind as much as like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah,
right. Those drum parts were worked out. That music was really put together.
It really was, But you mentioned Monty Python. When I joined Jan, he had a second keyboard player called Bob Christensen.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He's in the first band I was in, and he said to me, he'd come out with a couple of Python lines out. I said, "What? All that stuff?" He said, "We love that stuff."
I don't know. You'll appreciate this story, but we had a record shop. I was blessed enough to have a record shop in my town on the main drag, and we would hang out there. They let us rehearse in the basement there. It was this community thing that would blow your mind. So they would get imports. So we were getting Isotope. We were getting a lot of the really serious British fusion stuff because we couldn't get enough of it. Like, well, Return to Forever broken up, so it's like Mahavishnu was gone really fast. So like, what are the other satellite activities? And, I always look at the Italian scene. I like to look at the French scene, but you guys, there's so many bands that are like Nucleus that are really interesting fucking bands that people should be checking out. And
Graham Bond was great,
Graham Bond, right.
We had Jack in the band and John McLaughlin at one time,
That's right.
It was really a great time for music, really was, because there's so many great players at that time,
Interesting scene, man. I followed it a lot. McLaughlin, the way he emerges from that and changes, and people change directions, and different people play with different people, and the British scene has always been of great interest to me.
Yeah. It's and I think it was not an easy environment to sort of succeed in, really, because I think that music was pretty new here, and we were sort of crossing over from that thing where if you played a gig, people danced. People came to dance.
You're up against that.
It came to be the thing where people listened, and that was the real difference. They sat and listened to the music. Which was great, of course.
It's very interesting because Jean-Luc Ponty told me the same thing about that period. That if you wanted to do that music, you really would have to go to another place to do it, because it wasn't going to work in France, even in Paris. Because I thought the Paris scene was much more adventuresome at that time, but it was actually pretty conservative, especially in jazz.
The thing with France is they always had a great jazz scene, Jazz. Yes, yeah, they did. And a lot of I think quite a few American musicians went there and stayed there because they were treated very well, and it was a good environment for them, and it was always very healthy for the jazz scene in France. Where Germany was much more into the rock and the English stuff like that. Because I mean, the first time I went there was '69. I went with Alexis Korner, and I couldn't believe it. How good the audiences were. It was just, and I've been going back all my life to that country, and it's been great for music.
Oh, absolutely. Some of my most fun experiences have been in Germany.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I wanted to talk to you about Alexis Korner, but can I sort of hit you with like a prelude to that? Because there's a couple of things that happened in '69 that are interesting for me. One is Tramline and the other is New Church.
Well, Tramline, that was a one-off for me. That was a guy called John McCoy. And the Mickey Moody was a guitar player, it was later in Whitesnake. And they got the chance to make this album, and he said, will you do it with us? I mean, I had no rehearsal, nothing. I said, I don't really know if I want to do that. He said, oh, please come down. So we just went down for that day and made that album. Basically, well, what have you got? I got this, and kicked it around and put a few things there. It was very much, off the cuff, really,
Hey, yeah, that's happened, yeah.
But Alexis, I mean, Ron was friends with a guy called Ray Worley, who played a lot with Alexis. He was an alto player. And Ron and he were friends, and he said, Alexis is looking for a bass player. Do you know anybody? So Ron recommended me, and he said, well, I phoned Alexis. He said, have you got anything I can listen to? Well, we'd recorded the first 3-4 tunes we'd written with Backdoor on a little reel-to-reel tape on Ron's Grundig. That's what we had then. So I sent him that, and he said, well, yeah, that's great. He said, I've got a show in Vienna, next week. Can you do that? I said, yeah, but when are we going to rehearse? He said, I'll work something out. He was very loose like this, So the thing was, the upshot was there was no rehearsal in the end. So I end up in this gig where there must be 1,000 people. I'm going to play a gig with people I've never met, with music I've never heard. He just kept saying, you'll be all right. You'll be all right. And it was all right. It was.
What did it fall into?
Oh God! I mean, it was kind of blue. It was really blues, R&B, and gospel, And then at one point he said, "Do a solo." I said, "I don't do any." He said, "Hey, you do something," Just throws me in the deep end like that. Well, I've been messing around with that 3220 blues from Robert Johnson, So I played that, and it went down really well, and it gave me a lot of confidence, So whether he was just being very casual or he knew exactly what he was doing, I don't know. But I mean,
I think a good leader looks at the resources he has in his band.
Yeah, he had a way of picking people that on paper you'd think that's not going to work, but it did. Charlie Watts said that about him. He said he was a great band leader. Because I mean, he had a couple of bands. I mean, he had that band Charlie on drums, Jack on bass, Mick Jagger was his singer. It was like,
what band is that?
That was a Blues Incorporated, it was called. And that was Alexis's band. I mean, that's really what kicked off a whole R&B thing in England.
The first thing.
Him and a guy called Chris Barber, he had what you call a traditional jazz band. But they, I mean, at their own cost, they got Muddy Over and Big Bill Brunsey and, had them play and had them stay with them and all that.
Really?
Alexis said, there aren't many people who can say Big Bill Brunsey sang their kids to sleep, but I can.
That's wonderful, yeah.
That was in the 50s they got those guys over, and then of course Alexis,
the British connection into this is amazing to me.
Yeah, and he formed a thing called the Ealing Blues Club,
yeah,
and that was pretty much the beginning of it all, and it just got more and more popular, and all these bands sort of came from it, but they all came from that really. He was the instigator of it all.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible days,
So what was sort of the experience in different parts of the world with Backdoor for you?
Well, I mean, we did quite a few. We did quite a bit in Germany. We did some in Scandinavia. We did a lot of touring in America, though. That was a thing.
What were some of the bills you were on?
The first one we ever went out on was the Jay Giles band.
Yeah.
We went out with Jay Giles. Sort of a bit of an odd pairing, but we always got a good reaction. That was the thing.
Well, I think Jay Giles band audiences were probably fun. You know,
Yeah, they were. Yeah. So I mean, Ron said he said I sat there and this woman was teaching me how to play chess. He said I only realised that later it was Faye Dunaway. You know.
Wow. Yeah, I heard she knows, she's an expert in doo-wop music.
Yeah. I think she was with, was it Peter Wolf, the art player? I can't remember.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
I think she was with him at the time. I'm not sure, but yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But I mean, then we did a really long one. I mean, it was like 10 weeks or something with the LP. You know, that was we opened for them. And,
really? With a backdoor ELP in the US?
Yeah,
You're killing me. What string of dates was that?
That was in '74, and I mean, I think they liked the music, but they also liked the fact that we only needed the front 5 feet of the stage.
And very different musically, but cool. Their audience would get it, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, both mainly instrumental bands, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it went really well. You know, I did a few things with Carl as well on these solo things. Played bass for him on them. You know.
Oh, really?
You know, they've got a thing called Works, that album called Works, where they've each got a side.
Wait a minute. You're on Works.
Yeah, on Carl Palmer's side.
You're on Works. That's right. You see, you're omnipresent. Colin Hodgkinson, come on, man. Tell me about the Works. I'm fascinated because, see, I got to see them with the orchestra in Madison Square Garden. Mm-hmm. So this was it's a high point in my musical life, is that I paid $30 to a scalper to get 13th row center with the full orchestra, second night at the Garden. So some of the ticks had been worked out. Piano concerto, all the Gregg songs, the Carl songs. I mean, I don't know if you caught that, any of the orchestra shows, but they were magic. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward, this is such a strange thing to be able to tell you this story, but fast forward to 2006, from 1977, August, I think it was, or July, that summer I saw. Yeah, July, I think it was. They did 2 nights at the Garden. And then in 2006, we played with Jan Hammer, the Mahavishnu Project backed Jan Hammer, who was featured at the Moog Fest 2006 at BB King's. And it was a co-bill with Keith Emerson.
Okay.
And they had done double bills in Mahavishnu and ELP.
Yep.
And it was just at that point, I remember telling Keith that I saw the piano concerto perform when they had the orchestra, because I wanted him to know that's, you know, it was a mind-blowing experience. He was like drinking. I just thought he was so cool. He was just drinking like scotch out of a bottle while he was waiting to come in. And then he was chewing gum and he'd come in playing perfectly. You know, they got a pretty good piano sound for the moment, you know. Yeah. I mean, it was taken seriously. It was hard to mic an orchestra, but the overall effect, I think, was quite effective. And you know, so that happened. And so I said to him, Keith, you know, I was there. And he said, which night? And I said, Square Garden. I said, the second night. And he said, that was the one.
Okay.
Because they were losing so much money touring with an orchestra that the guys it was really Keith that was pushing for it. But the other 2 guys were starting to think like, we're losing a lot of money doing this.
Yeah.
And Keith was pushing for it. And they ended up, you know, trying to document it, but it was really hard to get it to sound good at that time.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you had the master, you know, ISO tracks today, what would be on them. Because it was just very hard to get that to work, but still the balls to go out with, you know, your own orchestra.
Yeah.
And so they were very serious about, you know, kind of bringing together of worlds in the way that you were.
Yeah. I mean, Carl asked me to do this thing we had a guitar player called Snuffy Walden, you know?
Yeah.
From Cheap Trick, I think the band he was in, you know. He was a great guy, really funny, Texas, you know, and so we did. I did quite a few tunes with him on there, you know. It was good fun, And Carl actually produced the very last Backdoor album. He was the producer of that, you know.
So what did you do on Works?
A tune called Bullfrog.
Oh, you're on Bullfrog. Right?
Yes.
Right? Am I in the ballpark there?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, geez, Bullfrog. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, see, Works was it was contemporaneous for me because I think I missed Brain Salad and Trilogy, which were like Bibles to me.
Well, the Brain Salad is the one we toured with them with. That was the album. That was the tour. Yeah.
So heavy at that point.
I mean, Keith was, like you said, a couple of times I saw him come to the stage, he'd come up on a BMW motorbike, roar up and park it. You know, he was character, you know.
Totally. He was totally like, for a guy who wasn't a large guy in stature, he was large on stage.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's really interesting actually, because he had that way of just going like, what if we push the keyboards to this level? What if we kept pushing, you know? There are a few guys who could just figure out like, what if we played in quad? What if we moved stuff around in quad live? You know, they're kind of trying to make, and look, you know this as well as anyone, making instrumental music interesting for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I mean, generally speaking, I mean, Jan said about Mahavishnu, he said, unfortunately, the crowd was nearly always guys, you know. It's not the sort of thing that girls went to see that much at that time, you know.
Very male energy.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
The energy is quite male.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I love it, but I gotta call it what it is.
Sure.
And you know I love it out there.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, did you play with Mahavishnu at all?
No, I didn't. But I met them all when I started playing with Jan. I met Jerry, who was really funny, you know.
Jerry's great.
Yeah.
I would like to have Jerry on this program. He's great. He's such an important figure because you're looking at guys who are sort of non-traditional instruments, and electric violin played well with a good sound and having a real personality, a persona. Yeah. That was a thing, like, you know, just like we look for that on bass, the way you were doing it, the way Jack Bruce was doing it, the way Chris Squire was doing it.
Yeah, I mean, what was I going to say? I thought of something then. It's gone now. Sorry.
I'm sorry I interrupted you, I think.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But yeah, so that was it. I mean, after Backdoor, I think that's when I started playing with Jan. I met him in '75, actually, at the Berlin Jazz Festival. They were on there, and I was with Backdoor, and we talked, and he said it'd be good to play together sometime. I said that'd be wonderful, because I mean, I loved his playing even then, you know. It was just, and then he phoned me, 1978, I think it was. He just called me out of the room, and he said, look, he said, I'm really pretty tired of playing fusion. I'd love to play some rock. How do you feel about it? I said, it's great with me. That's where I came in. So.
Oh, is that really okay? You see, I think. Did he say fusion though?
I think he did, yeah. Or you know, pretty much. Because yeah, there's that thing. Is it fusion? Is it jazz rock? Is it? We talked about this last time, didn't we, when we met? This
is when we were hanging out with Andre. Shout out to Andre Chomley. Listen, this is funny because I always ask people when it was happening, what was the parlance of the times?
Yeah.
In the parlance of the times, were you having any sense of what it was called?
Not really. I mean, I think we called it. I think it was more jazz rock
later, right?
I mean,
it's jazz rock.
Yeah, I mean it's rock, but with improvisation, which is jazz. You know, so that's makes more sense.
Okay, now this is so funny that you say this because. Jan, we're talking about our hero, Jan Hammer. And I have to tell you what he told me, which I found so interesting. And I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying, but I had just played a set of Intermounting Flame of all the pieces in order, start to finish as a kind of suite. And he was there with, I think with Rick Laird. Yeah. And rest in peace, Rick Laird. A wonderful bass player as well.
Yeah, he was.
And an Irish bass player, right? Originally?
Yeah.
What are your recollections of Rick Laird?
Well, I mean, I never really. The thing was, I used to see him in He played in Ronnie Scott's club, a Lightning House band, but he only played double bass there. I never saw him play bass guitar, but he was the one who got the first Backdoor album and played it to John and Jan. And Jan said, that's how he heard you guys. And apparently they all really loved it, which was quite a compliment, you know, coming from them. I mean, really, you know, so.
It is on that level. It's very cool.
Yeah, you know, it's very difficult sometimes to be objective about your own stuff, you know.
Well, you know, a thing that it's his own thing, I think, comes through, and you know, the notion that any instrument I mean, look, I led a band with vibraphone.
All right.
What are my chances to go? Because it's going to be vibraphone, guitar, electric and acoustic bass, or acoustic bass and drums. And so I was doing vibes into glockenspiel in this group Interzone, and trying to make that work as an out front thing. And so you have all these different strategies that you have to come up with to sound.
But I think that, you know, I think any combination of instruments can make something musically valid. And I was saying, I mean, one of my favorite groups when I was coming up was Jerry Mulligan's quartet, you know. And that was, when you think about it, it was baritone, valve trombone, double bass and drums. So you've got three instruments more or less in the bass clef, and they come up with this incredible music.
Well, they go 10 or 2, but I mean, there's a way to make that work, but those guys are amazing, right?
Yeah.
So you were influenced by jazz as much as you were influenced by anything else?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's and I tend to listen to it more and more these days. And
what's your favorite Mingus?
I think it's got to be blues and roots, you know. But I mean, the Mingus.
I mean,
Mingus,
song or solo or anything like that.
I love that Wednesday night prayer meeting. I love that. I just love that thing they get into there. But I mean, Goodbye Pork Pie Hat is a great tune, you know. He wrote a lot of great tunes, Mingus, really. And I just like the way he worked with his band, where he'd sing the parts to them and just get them to sort of feel it, you know, rather than reading everything. And
just, you know, Bird Calls off of or is it off?
Yeah, I don't know that one. No.
Yeah, he's just got a bebop thing, and also I'm a big fan of Mingus in trio with Max Roach and
Money Jungle.
Ellington, Money Jungle. Yeah,
I know that. I've got that. Yeah, that's great. That's
pretty great.
And that percussion discussion he plays with Max Roach as a duo, something else, you know.
Yeah, those are our heroes. So tell me a little bit about working with Alexis Korner.
Well, I mean, he was, you know, you could almost do what you wanted with him. You know, the responsibility was all, but I mean, if you give someone total freedom, they've got to be really responsible for what they do, you know. So I think it was always like that. And I mean, a friend of mine called Zoot Money, he's a nice piano player and singer. And he said, you know, the longest rehearsal we ever had with him was 1, 2, 3, 4. That was it. You know, he counted tune in. We never really rehearsed anything. We just, you know, he came up with a tune, and that's the way it was, you know. I mean, I made quite a few albums with him, and we ended up, I mean, the last few years we had a duo together. That was great, you know, just I think sort of 79, 81, around that time. We had a duo, and it was really good. You know, we just had a great time together. You know, you say. Then he died. I mean, he was only 55. He died on New Year's Day in '84. You know.
Wow.
Yeah, very sad. You know.
Well, tell me a little bit about the Cozy Powell album, Octopus.
That was a bit of a strange thing, really, because he phoned me up and asked me if I'd do it. I thought, yeah, great, you know. And I went down, made this album with him. I think Mel Galley was on guitar. And I think it was, God, who's the keyboard player now with Deep Purple? You know,
Don Airey.
Don Airey, right, Don. And we made it. I wrote something for him on there, you know, and we played. I didn't know, but that was my audition for Whitesnake, because David Coverdale said to him, if you like playing with Colin, if you feel good with him on bass, that's good enough. So that's how that came about, really, you know.
So interesting. That's how that came about?
Yeah, that's it. Well, Cozy was great. I mean, he was
Please, yes.
He never ever bullshitted anybody. He said exactly what he thought. I said, you'd never get in the diplomatic corps with your attitude. But he was great. He said exactly what he thought to anyone, and he was straight ahead. He was a great drummer. He really was.
A great drummer, right? All different styles.
Really powerful too, and
powerful.
Yeah, he was. He was great. I mean, his solo when he had the pyro going on, that was just. I mean, I used to run off stage and get under the table, put my hands over my ears. It's incredible explosions at the end, Sometimes little pieces of the plaster falling down and stuff, It was unreal. And sometimes
that's so Spinal Tap.
It was, and I couldn't. I said, look, I can't see, because he had the cue to get into the next tune. I said, I can't see you. He said, look, I'll give you Dagenham. I said, what do you mean? He said, Dagenham, boom, off we went. It was wild, man. It really was.
That's quite good.
Yeah.
That's very Spinal Tap.
Oh yeah, but bless him, he went too soon, but he was good, really was.
So he lost control of the vehicle somehow?
Yeah, he did. I mean, he always liked fast cars. He didn't wear a seatbelt, So I think he got a phone call or something. I'm not quite sure what happened, but he lost control, and that was it. Great pity.
Single car accident. But yeah, that's a terrible loss.
Yeah, it was.
But right on the heels of that, you ended up somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, what did I do? I started playing with Spencer Davis then after that, and that lasted a long time. It was really, it was a good gig for me, because I really, I didn't have anything else at the time. But we did a lot of offshoots from it. We do these sort of R&B All-Stars things. With Brian Auger,
wow,
John Lord, Tony Ashton, Miller Anderson. It was just a great bunch of guys. It was just all good fun. There were no egos involved. It was just and people loved it, of course. Especially John Lord's name on. That meant a lot of. It pulled a lot of people.
Talk about John Lord for a moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, John was actually, he was the one who suggested to David Coverdale that I'd be good in Whitesnake, because we'd been out the year before with this R&B All-Stars thing, and we hit it off really well. We were always good friends. I mean, I did that solo album called Pictured Within, he's it's a classical one with the orchestra.
Oh yeah, okay.
But I played a couple there on there.
Did you arrange on that?
No, I didn't. No, he was very good at all that. He was
adept at arranging his own stuff.
He was, yeah. I mean, he did a lot of classical stuff, as well. He was well into that. And then we finally had a band together. He said to me, "Do you fancy playing some blues with me?" And I said, "Well, of course, So that was good. It was him and Brian Auger would do it, or Zoot, and it was really good.
Was the organ like really loud?
No, well, Brian can be a bit loud, but when he's that good, you don't care. He's such a great player. Amazing. I mean, he'll be 82 this year, Brian.
Wow.
I mean, I spoke to him last year, but I mean, we did a lot of stuff together. We did a few TV shows together, kids shows, which was, we could dress up and act stupid, and it was just. He's such a laugh, Brian. He's a very funny guy. So, yeah, a lot of fun.
And you did something with Charlie Watts, who we recently lost.
Yeah, there was a band. It was actually the piano player from the Stones was a guy called Ian Stewart. He was never on the pictures or stuff. Let's say he didn't have the image, but he was always a member of the band. And he was a lovely player. I mean, he could do all that Jimmy Yancey stuff and, boogie and rock. And he was just great. And he wanted to have this sort of band with two boogie woogie piano players, and then like a great horn section we had, and then Jack was on bass and Charlie on drums. It was called Rocket 88. Alexis was in it. It was.
Jack was on bass.
Yeah, that's it. And then if Jack couldn't do it, it was my gig then. I'd do it. I'd come in and play bass. So yeah, that was a lot of fun while it lasted. But he's someone else who went very, very early, Ian Stewart.
What was your Ian Stewart?
Yeah, yeah. He died young too, you know, died but heart attack, you know, so that was sad. He was a lovely guy. He really was, you know.
And Jack as well was someone that we lost.
Yes, yeah.
I was lucky enough to produce his first posthumous album. It was a live album from Live from the Bottom Line, 1980, where it was he, Billy Cobham, Clem Clemson, and David Sanchez.
I like Clem Clemson a lot. He's a lovely guitar player. I think he is. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So it was a really cool band. They did instrumentals. I mean, you think about guys like Gary Moore, guys like Clem Clemson that can just bring they bring the melody, they bring guitar lyricism to it.
Yeah. I I opened for Gary Moore. I did a 30-minute solo spot for him for 18 shows, you know, because I'd done it for Bill Wyman's Rhythm Kings. You know, the Rhythm Kings he had. He had with Albert Lee and Georgie Fame, all these guys. And he phoned me up because, I mean, I knew Bill right back in the early 70s. And he said, do you want to go out and tour with me? I said, hang on a minute, Bill, you play bass. He said, no, not with me. Just do that thing you do, you know. I said, listen, I'm not. He said, what if it's all Stones fans? I walk out there, just one guy with a bass. He said, no, it'd be great. So I did it. And it actually went really well. I did 30 minutes of my own, you know.
Solo?
Yeah, a few vocals, ragtime, a bit of jazz, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, it was cool. And then Gary Moore phoned me up and he'd seen it and he said, will you open for me? So I ended up doing the same with him. Did, you know, quite a few shows. Yeah. That was nerve-wracking though.
That's a lot, right?
Oh yeah, it is really. You know, it's yeah. And the thing was, a lot of the time the shows would start around 7:30. So I do 30 minutes, I come off, I'll be standing in puddles of adrenaline with nowhere to go, you know. Yeah, so that was it really, you know.
But you seem to have always been about pushing boundaries of what performance is, what's expected from the instrumentalist, and make it fun, make it interesting.
But music's got to be fun. If there's no fun, there's no point, is there? Really, you know.
Right. Good fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's got to be fun. Always.
Yeah, it's so true. It's funny, you know, we were grooving earlier on Untold Passion.
Yeah.
And it's like an undeniable level of ecstasy is achieved.
Just so intense.
You're swept into it, you know, and you just go, well, that's fun. That's an experience. I don't do it often. I can't, it's too draining.
Oh, yeah. There's a few things.
It takes a toll after a while, but like Jan at that stage where he's going tit for tat with guitar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is just so emotional. And the note choice thing that he had that was so uniquely him, the intervallic thing.
He played drums too on all that album. You know?
And he's a killer drummer.
He's a killer. I said that to him. I said, you know, I said, how'd you learn it? He said, well, I had two good teachers. He said, Alvin Jones and Tony Williams.
And that's exactly right. You know, I had the wonderful experience of working with Jan with the Mahavishnu Project. And he, you know, he was part of all of those, like he played with Elvin.
Yeah,
he worked with Elvin. So, you know, he was coming out of jazz group Sarah Vaughan. He was coming out of jazz, as everyone was. There was no sense really of what we call jazz rock yet. It was brewing, but other things were happening. Yeah, so Jan,
he played some Moog with Elvin, I think. You know,
yes.
He did. So that he'd started it then already, you know, which was. But I mean, those early ones, they were only monophonic, weren't they? You know.
I think so.
Yeah,
they're not. Yeah, they're not like widely. They wouldn't be considered audiophile. But no, it's just good to see. Also, he had a trio with Miroslav and Miroslav's brother.
Yeah, that's right. Miroslav's a fantastic player, you know, he really. But I mean, a couple of things I love that Jan did with, you know, Tony's The Joy of Flying, that album.
Yes. Can I tell you? Oh, I'll tell you mine and you tell me yours. Favorite tune.
I like Going Far and Aries on that. The two duets he does with Tony. You know, Jan and Tony.
Oh, you mean Be-da,
that's amazing. Amazing. You know.
That's crazy.
The other one we used to play, that Going Far, yeah, that's on there as well. And we did that with a band sometimes, you know. That's a great tune.
So he had a lot of cool tunes around that time.
Yeah.
But the other one I was going to say is Going Far.
Mhm.
And then the other one was Coming Back Home.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, that's
a pretty tune. I like that. Yeah, I
right.
love it. Mhm.
So lyrical.
Yeah.
Jan, open invitation to come on to the podcast and talk with me about geeky things like overdubbing keyboards and orchestrating using synthesizers. Come on. That's all we're doing here. We're just having some geeky fun.
I mean, I can't believe how much music, great music that guy wrote. I mean, all the Miami Vice stuff too. I mean, it's just to come up with that every week. All those
I watch it just to listen to the music. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he sent me there's I think a double CD of it, you know, the complete Miami Vice.
And that's available too. Yeah.
He put that in the post for me, which is great. I mean, it's just a buzz to listen to, you know.
And did we talk enough about Spencer Davis?
Well, you know, I mean, it was pretty much the same thing every gig. There wasn't a lot of improvisation or stuff, you know. I mean, because I mean, he had like 3-4 huge hits, you know, Give Me Some Loving, Keep On Running, which is, I mean, was Steve Winwood, and a great singer and player, you know. So I mean, we were basically doing that. It was, I mean, Miller Anderson was in the band, who was a very good singer and a nice guitar player. He was with Mountain at one time, you know. So, but I did that on and off for quite a long time. But it wasn't my full-time thing, you know. So anyway, after that,
Was Felix Paplardi a force?
I mean, well, I only met him when he produced that album of ours, you know.
What was your impression?
I mean, he was very helpful. I mean, he didn't. He wasn't the kind of producer who was very much sort of, you know, you've got to do it this way, you've got to do it that way. He just make a few timely suggestions, you know, and he was good, you know. It was good working with him. He was easy, I thought, you know. Yeah, that was it. Someone else who died pretty young too, you know.
Well, that was tragic.
It was tragic. It really was. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting. When we talk about blues rock and we talk about bass players, there's such a lineage of great British bass players. Trevor Bolder.
Yeah. John Wetton, you know.
Wetton.
Yeah.
Come on.
Right. I mean, there's a lot, you know. There's a lot of them, you
know. You know, I was lucky enough to see Trevor with Uriah Heep. Mm-hmm. Gary Thane in Uriah Heep was a strong voice.
Yes, he was. But I told you, I mean, one of the bass players I find the most fascinating is the guy who played with Little Feat. I think we talked about this, Ken Gradney. And that guy is something else. I mean, really, how do you work out what he's doing? I mean, he's not actually playing a line a lot. Sometimes he's just following the vocal, but it just all works perfectly. When you come to try and play it, you think, what is this guy doing? You know, it's just so original, I think. I love that. Of all the American bands, I think that was my favorite one for you know.
It's important, I think, I say this to my students, to hear from the bottom up and from the top down.
Absolutely, you know.
Because you're occupying a certain amount of ground that doesn't really mesh with other stuff, doesn't have to in a way, can be clear and supportive, but being also separate. Right? They're not going to put a bunch of muddy stuff down there. So you're going to have to really construct down there.
That's
and
right.
You guys are doing that. All the people we're mentioning were doing that.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in some cases singing, you know, that's a thing. So figuring out voicing and how things stack up, you guys were doing a lot of arranging.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think it's like we said before, that the foundation's got to be strong, like a house, you know. So you get the bass and drums happening, you're halfway there, I think, you know. You get a really good rhythm section, you know. That's a lot of it, you know. If that's shaky, the whole thing's shaky, you know. I think Miles said that, didn't he? The band's as good as the drummer.
Yeah, he did say that. Phil Collins said the drummer's the goalkeeper.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I mean, there's a lot of truth to the drummer is kind of has to be the backbone.
Absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So tell me about the other projects that were happening around that time. You must have been super busy.
Well, yeah. I mean, we did this show in Germany called Super Drumming. You know, I don't know if it ever came out in the States, but it was all done in an old steelworks in Germany, which was, it looked amazing with the blast furnaces or the lights up and stuff. You know,
Oh.
we had like a house band, so it was Brian Auger again, me, and it was organised by a guy called Pete York, who was the original drummer with Spencer Davis Group, you know. And what he did was he got all these different drummers to come over. We'd have like a week with each of them. So, I mean, he had like Louis Belson, Ed Thigpen from the Oscar Peterson Trio, Steve Ferrone, you know. I mean, it was just magic. And we'd just have a different drummer and we'd rehearse. And then we'd play a few days with them. Someone else would come in. It was a blast, you know, it really was. Especially playing with a guy from the Oscar Peterson Trio. I mean, that was, I mean, him and Brian just doing a trio thing. And it's like, God, this guy's like being on a cloud with him behind you. You know, it was just wonderful, wonderful stuff.
This is very geeky, but he manufactured Thigpen brushes.
Oh, right.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you do this.
His brush thing was amazing.
So we had special brushes that we could buy that allowed us to have articulation, but also be able to do brush things. And it's just like a kind of plastic bunch of stuff that, you know, what would they be called? Tiny little cylinders that then, you know, sort of mesh it together. And that was the brush. And they were called Thigpen brushes.
Okay.
And you could sort of go like, oh, maybe I can try to beat, but you could never play brushes like that. No, but get the Thigpen brushes. No, but it didn't. It's not that easy.
Yeah, because I mean, he emigrated to Denmark, I think, and he was in the university there teaching percussion.
Yeah,
he was a very sweet guy, really terrific player. You know,
that's so great. That's great. So you're working with the greatest rhythm sections. You're part of so many rhythm sections.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Really was. Yeah.
Tell me about Whitesnake.
Well, I mean, I had a couple of years with that band. It was interesting, let's say. But,
Coverdale's like kind of at a certain point an interesting singer, and then at a certain point not. It's so interesting.
I don't know. It was just, you know, in the end, it wasn't for me in the end, you know, it was just.
What was it?
I don't know, you know, I don't know. It was just, I didn't really felt I belonged in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How did you get in then?
Well, because of doing the thing with Cozy and being recommended. And I thought, why not? I mean, I just done
the gig
with Sean and, you know, Neil and Jan playing the rock things. I thought, well, why not? You know, so, that's kind of how I got into it, really. But then I came out of that and started with Spencer and so on. And I mean, now, of course, the late years is the 10 years after thing, you know. That's what I've been doing for the last 6-7 years, you know. Well, nothing for the last 2 years. That was, well, that came out of the blue as well. It was Rick Lee, the drummer, you know, with the band. I'd met them because we used to play with Spencer. We played a lot of these shows in Germany where they were called oldie shows, which we all hated the title, but basically they were bands from the 60s and 70s, you know. I mean, Susie Quattro, Tremolos, all these sort of things.
Wow, okay.
And so we did that, and that's how I got to meet those guys the first time. And Rick phoned me up and he said, look, he said, you know, the bass player and the guitar player are leaving, you know, Leo Lyons and Joe Gooch. He said, would you like to come down and have a play with us? Well, I mean, that came out of the blue for me, but I said, yeah, sure. So I went down and had a play with them and got on all right. And they were trying one guy on guitar who didn't really happen. Then we got Marcus Bonfanti in there, the guy who's there, and he's absolutely wonderful. So when he came and I thought, I want to do this. So it's been a joy playing with those guys. I mean, I had a lot of fun, and we've been to the States with it a couple of times, been to Mexico and all over Europe again. It's so it's just the last 2 years, of course, it's been an absolute desert for all of us for gigs. I mean, it's been nothing. But there you go. That's really where I'm up to in my life, So, yeah.
But so many great experiences along the way, and so many
Absolutely.
collaborations, so many sidebars, and so many different directions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that was part of the territory, right, Colin Hodgkinson?
Yeah, I've had an interesting life, mate. Really.
Yeah.
I'm blessed.
So you kind of just tried everything that was possible, and went into a lot of different areas, but also pushed into some areas.
Yeah. I mean, it's that's life, isn't it? It's sort of you find yourself somewhere unexpected, and it turns out to be really good. It's I don't know. It's just always great what musicians can do together. It's what when you bounce off each other and stuff, you get the most wonderful surprises sometimes.
I do, yeah.
It's been a joy. Most of it, I've been very fortunate. I mean, I've had a few times when I've had to work at music, just like we all do, you're just doing it because that's your living. But mercifully few. I mean, most of the time it's been with great players and good circumstances,
How important is the legacy of 10 years after?
I mean, I think, because any of the people who were in Woodstock, in the film or at the festival, they did very well afterwards, and I mean, that Alvin was a great guitar player. Alvin Lee was, and they got a lot from it. They toured a lot, and they kept together for a long time. I mean, when you think they started in '67 and two of them are still there, it's like it's a long time. Really, it's over 55 years. Really, it's a long time.
Wow.
But they've got a very loyal fan base, I'd say, especially in Germany and in Europe, and France, which is somewhere a lot of rock bands don't work. But for some reason, whenever they've been there, we've done really well with it. It's been great.
You play the Olympia?
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did the Olympia. Yeah. And I mean, we were supposed to play that, the place that got the terrorist attack, the Bataclan.
Oh, yeah.
We were supposed to do that 2 weeks after, but they moved the venue, and we did a different one. But it was nice to go to a different country, see, because I mean, I think just about everywhere in Germany you can play. I've played at some time or another.
I think it's interesting because it shows the wherewithal of the music, doesn't it? I mean, it's got to exist in different cultures and subcultures. It's got to communicate, in those subcultures.
Yes, that's true.
It's got to come across.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you go into these regions and play in halls,
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Because I was on that scene with a couple of different projects, but with the Musical Box, which was a Genesis repertoire concert effort, and with license from Genesis, and that was like a touring show in all those little towns. You play at the Yar 100 Holla, right? in the dungeon like dressing rooms.
Oh, I know him. Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
Those dank showers.
Oh
my God. Anyway, why am I bringing that up? But that was the circuit. You play. These were venues, and the regions in Germany. And how east did you guys go at earlier on?
Well, I mean, when I had a duo with a guy called Frank Dietz. He's a German guitar player from Berlin, really good player. I mean, we played together nearly 30 years on and off, And we actually went. I mean, I did 2 tours of the East Germany when it was still the DDR. It was quite an eye opener, really. I mean, it was such a totally different culture, I mean,
how did you make that happen?
Sorry, how did it happen?
How was that able to happen?
Well, because the West German government were very, very keen to get, the culture thing still going through there and keep, So, I think we got some sponsorship from them, and and they got an invite from the people in the East. So yeah, we went over and played there, and it was pretty amazing. I mean, the people were fantastic. The audiences were wonderful, so receptive, and I think just grateful that you went and played there. Really,
Hungry, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it was a closed society. It really was. It's a strange feeling when you go through the wall and all the rest of it. It's yeah. So yes, we did a couple of tours of that. That was interesting, really.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that that Jan fled that.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he I think he went to Munich first, didn't he? He came from Prague. He told me that I think he got out 2 weeks before the Russians invaded, in the Prague Spring, wasn't it? He applied for a scholarship to Berkeley, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, he got it,
mm-hmm.
and he got out. I mean, his timing couldn't have been better, really. But he couldn't go home for ages. He didn't really have a kind of valid passport anymore. It was pretty tough, I guess, not to see his folks for 10 years or something like that.
More.
Yeah. So,
and their careers were affected.
Oh yeah. But I mean, it's all, when you go now, I mean, there's still a slight difference in the East, but I mean, the autobahns go right through there now, and it's all been, because it was all pretty run down, to be honest. It's
remember driving to Poland on that road?
Oh yeah,
it was just like a constant rumble of the whole for 8 hours.
Yeah, I remember.
11 hours, I think. It was just like, wow, it was destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I did. I worked for a guy called Chris Rea. You've heard of him?
Yeah.
He's very big, and I mean, he's hugely popular in this country. He wrote a lot of very sort of popular songs and stuff. But I went with him. I did one tour with him, and we did all these, like Romania, Belgrade, and all these places, the Baltic states, and it was really amazing to go and see it.
Did you play in Macedonia?
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. But we had that was the only time I've been on a private jet. That was great. So we didn't have to do those horrible drives,
Well, those would have been some drives, yeah.
Oh God, yeah, really. But so I think that's it, Greg.
So great to speak with you, Colin Hodgkinson. Thank you for taking time to reminisce and clear some things up.
Yeah, mate.
We like to get it on the record here.
It's been great to talk to you, really, and we'll keep in touch, huh?
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you everyone for listening. And this has been my chat with the great bassist, Colin Hodgkinson. And we thank you all for listening. And thank you, Colin, for taking the time.
It's a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.